had 4 years of Donald Trump, and we couldn't get anywhere near the table to represent your interests.
Good to be here.
Yeah, brother, take a walk. Take a walk, because I get paid to tell my members the truth.
All right, folks, welcome back. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. I am joined by President of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, IUPAT, Jimmy Williams. Brother Jimmy Williams, welcome to the program. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jacob.
IUPAT also a sponsor of the program. We appreciate y'all's support. And so before we we got a couple of topics that we wanted to get to, but I figured it might be worth talking and letting you talk to the audience some about your background. Like, how did you get involved in the labor movement, and what made you want to, ultimately, like with a lot of people that I talk to, your whole life is basically revolving around unions and your union specifically, and that takes a lot of determination and dedication, and like there's usually a pretty good story there. So what's the thing that drove you to want to be president of the Painters Union?
Well, I can honestly say I don't think I ever wanted to be president of our union. It was more of like just growing up in a extremely union household within our union. I'm a fourth generation member of my union. My father, my grandfather, my great grandfather, numerous uncles, cousins. We all, growing up in Northeast Philadelphia, we all kind of gravitated towards one trade particularly. And growing up, I mean, everything that we did was from christenings to family gatherings. Everything was at the union hall. And it was one of those things that at the kitchen table was always thank the union every time we had dinner or an event or any sort of family function. And for me particularly, my uncle passed away when I was at a young age, and he was a building trades leader in the city of Philadelphia. And I was young. I was like 14 or 15 years old. And to see the amount of people that came to pay respect, I said, man, if I could ever do like anything with my life that affected people the way this man's life did, to me, that meant everything. Give back to the union, give back to people. And so it was just something I think that was ingrained in me at a young age, very generational.
And so you said that there was and presumably it was the painters union that members of your family kind of were attracted to in particular, and at least over the last few years, IUPAT has gotten something of a reputation of being like the most progressive building trades union. I don't know how much y'all like to lean into that kind of branding, or not, but has it always been that way? Has the Painters Union always been kind of at the forefront of the building trades union coalition on really important progressive issues, or is that something that's happened relatively recently?
I think it's been an evolution within our union over the last 25, 30 years. And we've had some amazing leaders at the top of our organization that set the course for us. And so I think it's something that we've evolved into and that we absolutely own as like our brand of, we believe strongly in making sure that, we organize in a progressive way, that we service our members in a more progressive way. And, we've had leaders that, quite frankly, I've had the opportunity to watch up close, that I think had set the course for us that we're on today. And we don't plan on ever veering off of that. It's kind of in our DNA. It's what we are.
And so, it is National Apprenticeship Week this week, and apprenticeships are really at the center of, speaking about branding, of a lot of the branding of the building trades. Apprenticeships are a really important tool that the building trades have. And so I figured we only have one show a week, so I figured it'd be worth spending a little bit of time on this week, and apprenticeships generally. So why are apprenticeships so important to the building trades? Why do y'all talk about them so much?
Well, because I mean they're the thing that separates the union construction industry from the open shop non-union construction industry,
Mm,
because we invest millions of dollars in our workforce training programs for our future. And because within the construction trade, I mean, you don't just get out of high school and know how to work on a 40, 50 story high rise construction building, read blueprints, do layout work. Like this isn't something that just anybody can walk out off of one job and go to work in the construction sector. So we have always prided ourselves on investing deeply and across the building trades. We invest over 1.6, $1.5 billion a year in direct workforce training. And it's like one of the most untalked about things up
mm.
until recently that the trades provide to the workforce. And I think like we are like the third or fourth largest post-secondary education program in the entire country, right?
Hmm.
And so it's one of those things that we just hold dearly, and it's kind of fitting that National Apprenticeship Week to be able to talk about it today, knowing that in the future these programs could be put at risk again by an incoming administration that, quite frankly, during their time in office, tried to water it down. Um,
Mm.
and that's a fear going forward, especially at a time where there's such a need for this type of direct education and pipeline training for people to get into these high paying, quality union jobs. It's something that honestly is like the gold standard that we hold within the unionized construction industry.
And so just to elaborate on that, I want to talk about the attacks that we are anticipating on apprenticeship programs and the I was talking to my dad, actually, funny enough. He's a conservative, and I think I haven't asked him how he voted. I'm assuming that he voted for Trump if he voted. It's kind of frustrating, but he knows the work that I do, and he was actually asking me, he was like, "So are you going to be out of a job, now that Trump is Trump has been elected?" And we were talking about the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Chips and Science Act, and how, you know, there have been some strings attached to these dollars that are going out into communities that I think are just common sense, and they shouldn't be a partisan issue, right? That it just seemed like, if I, as a tax dollar, I as a taxpayer, when my tax dollars pay for something, I don't want it to go just to the lowest bidder. So that they can, so that these contractors can pay people terrible wages and the executives can make millions of dollars. I want my tax dollars, the public money, to be used for the public good. I want there to be apprenticeship programs. I want there to be good wages. I want the people that do public works to have health care, to have a pension, I have all of this kind of stuff. And he's agreeing with me on all of this stuff. And I really think at the voter level, at the rank and file level, union or non-union, I do genuinely think that the idea of just going to the lowest bidder is not a popular thing. And I want to get to that. But before we do, talking about the apprenticeships specifically, and the value that they provide. You mentioned that they are the building trades apprenticeship programs are the third or fourth largest post-secondary education program in the country. Um, and a lot of people, I don't think, realize that union apprenticeship programs are like real educational things. Like, you have, because people think of the building trades like, oh, you go to building trades if you're dumb and you can't go to college. And like, that's just not the case, right? Like, you have to have a certain amount of competency and you have to go through these classes. And so walk us through when building trades apprentices go through these 4 years, like what that looks like and what they come out of it with.
Well, it's like the perfect model to how to do workforce development training, because not only are you registered in classes, but you're also
Mm,
already on the job and you're
right.
making money as you're learning. And people think, oh, whatever, you join an apprenticeship program, maybe you'll learn on the job. It's not the case. I mean, our programs are registered with the federal DOL. where we have a set of standards that we have to teach to. There's all sorts of things in there with health and safety, how to work safely on the job, but also the skills training necessary to be productive. There's a reason why there are 7,000 employers just in my union. They see the value in it,
Mm-hmm.
because we get to help develop a workforce for them. And the training's intense. It's not something that, just anybody can walk into and succeed, right? Like, it's a deep investment in teaching people a lifelong skill that they can use for the rest of their career in the industry. And it's a proven model that has worked, for generations, really.
And so they're going through these classes, like, they're working on the job and they're learning on the job, but they're also, going to classes a few times a week, after work, and they're learning these things, and they really do get, the equivalent of a college education, and while they're earning and learning and all this kind of stuff. So it's a
Our,
really, go ahead.
our no, our we have half of our programs around the country are actually registered with the Department of Education and accredited
Hmm.
as a associate degree giving body for folks that can work
Oh, wow.
towards a college education and college degree at the end of it. In certain parts of the country, our apprentices walk away with their apprenticeship completion, but also leave with an associate's degree that they can use to
Mm,
advance their career too. And it's completely 100% free to those
right.
workers, because it's paid into by all the other members or that work under our collective bargaining agreements. It's just a proven model, you know.
And you mentioned, some of the forces that are antagonistic to apprenticeship programs, and specifically one of those is the associated builders and contractors. And one of my biggest frustrations, and I talked to a reporter about this in Alabama, and I kind of chastised him a little bit because he referenced the ABC just as if, and most people think it is, just like a neutral, you know, construction contractor coalition that just wants to build things, and they care about, they're just a construction industry trade group, and so these are the experts about the construction industry, and we should talk to them. And it was frustrating in particular because the article that they were quoted in was an article about, like, construction worker mental health and the high suicide rate among construction workers, because I know and that the conditions that the ABC puts on these people and that puts on their workers is a huge contributor to the problem of mental health among construction workers. And then to see them kind of quoted as like, oh, look at what the ABC is doing to help, construction workers, was just so frustrating. So can you explain how what the ABC is in actuality, and then how they approach their workforce development and workforce training programs, and how the ABC's style of apprenticeships, to the extent that they even call it that, is like is inferior to what the union apprenticeship programs give.
Yeah, sure. The long history of the ABC is, they were established 100% solely by the Chamber of Commerce and by business owners to break union collective bargaining agreements and union strongholds. And, they are 100% a management organization made up of employers, all 100% anti-union, non-union employers that did not want to adhere to standards that were established over the course of generations in the construction industry. And that's, what they were set up to do. And so within that, they speak in this tone that they somehow represent workers. They do not.
Mm.
They're 100% set up to support business and to support the business community. And it has to be understood, because whenever there is, trillions of dollars at play in the construction industry, any
Hmm.
sort of business organization is going to look to maximize their profits and not adhere to standards that are going to help the working class, right? And that is what the ABC is. It's what the ABC always was. Within that, they've developed workforce models that do not adhere to Department of Labor standards, that do not have the registered nature of the apprenticeship program. So people may join an apprenticeship program with the ABC. Well, it means absolutely nothing on the back end, and it has no standards to it. And number three, typically they don't even graduate their apprentices. It's just set up as a model that appears to be the unionized model. And it just isn't. It just 100% isn't, never was. It's a 100% controlled business organization, solely established to push back on the standards that have been established. They're 100% against Davis-Bacon and prevailing wages. They stand against project labor agreements. They're against Department of Labor registered apprenticeship programs. So literally everything that the unionized construction industry stands for, the ABC stands in direct opposition to.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate. And a lot of the problem with their, kind of quote unquote training or apprenticeship programs is that they the union apprenticeship programs, you really come out, if you graduate from the painters union's apprenticeship program or the ironworkers apprenticeship program, you come out as a well-rounded tradesman with a general understanding of your craft. And what my understanding has been from conversations with like building trades folks is like the ABC programs, they teach to the task and they do not create, right, like a well-rounded tradesman that can go off and do any iron worker job. They take a look at like, okay, we're doing this bridge construction and I need one person who's going to turn this wrench for, 7 months. So I'm going to have this, I'm going to teach him how to turn the wrench properly, right? And then he's going to turn the wrench for 7 months. And then, and then I get to pay him less because he's not really a craftsman, a tradesman. He just knows how to turn a wrench. I can pay him less. He's not going to be able to compete for higher wages on the next job that I bring him in to turn a different wrench, right? And so it's frustrating that the kind of equivalence that people draw. And so
they also have no infrastructure to do the training. I mean, we have over 300 certified master trainers around the United States. We have training facilities that are 700 or 100,000 square foot training facilities all throughout the country where the hands-on training's being performed. They don't have that infrastructure and have no vehicle to invest in the type of training we do.
Right. And so you mentioned that under the last Trump administration, the union apprenticeship programs came under attack. And so could you remind us what those attacks were and explain to folks, like my dad, who last night was kind of, I don't know if he was necessarily surprised at me, at my anticipation that a lot of these strings from some of the Bill and IRA funding are going to be pulled back or not enforced as vigorously as they might have been under the Biden administration. But to a maybe a more conservative person like my dad who believes that, yes, like if my tax dollars are funding something, I don't want it to go to make some guy rich and then underpay and undertrain the people at the bottom. Right. He doesn't agree with that. And so what are the attacks that happened in the last administration? What do you anticipate going forward? And why is this happening? Why does this have to be a partisan thing? Why don't Republicans agree that we should have well-trained tradesmen?
Well, I mean, the attack came towards the end of the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. And what the attack was to take away the Department of Labor and the oversight of registered apprenticeship programs and hand them over solely to the business community. So the business community could say, and anybody can say, I have an apprenticeship program on paper, and then they self-regulate their apprenticeship programs and they water down the standards and they could do whatever they want. And having business and industry controlled workforce development training is a horrible model. And it's one that would not, be able to stand the test of time to do the things that we've done over generations, right? And it's all because there is a ton of money to be made off of these public investments in construction. And anytime you turn over the public good to the private sector, you are going to have nothing but greed take over. You're going to have nothing but a lack of oversight, and all of these standards that have been fought for go away. Now, the Trump administration took a little bit of time before they made this direct assault and direct attack on the registered apprenticeship programs. And quite frankly, they ran out of time. And by the time they instituted, their version of industry controlled apprenticeship programs, he lost his reelection bid. And the first thing President Biden did was overturn the executive orders and restore the Department of Labor's oversight over registered apprenticeship programs. There is no way that this current Trump administration is going to take that long of a time. The direct assault will come pretty early, and it'll come fast, especially given the time we live in right now, where there is over $3 trillion worth of government direct investment in construction work through the bipartisan infrastructure bill, the CHIPS bill, and the Inflation Reduction Act. There's too much money to be made for business, and there's going to be a direct attack there so that they can profitize and maximize their profits off of the public investment.
And so, you said that the Department of Labor is probably not going to take as much time to try to ramp up this attack. Over the last couple of days, it's been in the news that Teamsters President Sean O'Brien is pushing for Chavez DeRemer, Representative Lori Chavez DeRemer, a Republican from Oregon, who has apparently been, I'm not familiar with this person, but apparently she has been a more pro-labor Republican, like one of the three that exist maybe across the country, ostensibly. Again, I'm not familiar with her record, but Teamsters President Sean O'Brien has been pushing for her. Do you have any insight into this person? If this person was nominated to the Department of Labor, do you think that potentially these concerns that you have about the apprenticeships specifically would be alleviated, or is her pro-labor record kind of overblown, or is there like no chance that she's nominated?
Well, no, I mean, listen, I have no insight as to what the Trump administration is thinking currently. I can tell you that if she were to be appointed, it would be a direct nod to organized labor enough to know that we have somebody there that at least understands our issues. And that's a good thing, so that we can at least have an open door to discuss things that she is keenly aware of. And she is one of only 3 Republicans that voted for the PRO Act in Congress. She understands organized labor's issues. To me, this is going to be the test of the incoming administration. Are they going to pick someone like her, or are they going to pick somebody that comes directly from the business community that is solely intent on tearing down these longstanding standards and not fight on behalf of labor? And that's going to be the test. And so yes, and thank God that we at least have somebody that we can put forth that says, all right, they understand our issues, because the rest of the incoming crew does not,
right,
and is fundamentally opposed to the things that we have fought for a long time. So this will be the test of this current administration and what they are really thinking around workers' rights and the working class as it relates to organized labor.
Yeah, you mentioned the incoming crew. I mean, the most recent addition was Pam Bondi for Attorney General, and she, as Attorney General of Florida, was de facto responsible for the enforcement of Florida's minimum wage law, which is higher than the federal minimum wage law, because Florida, during her tenure as Attorney General there, did not have a Department of Labor. It was abolished under Jeb Bush. And she did not prosecute a single minimum wage violation case, right? And so these are not kind of even just the most recent one, you can point specifically to, like, this is not a person concerned with labor issues. And so, and so as we're wrapping up, I'm interested in your thoughts on the election specifically. This is obviously a huge news. You know, we just talked about how maybe there's a potential for reprieve, specifically from the Department of Labor perspective. You know, we'll see. I don't know that either of us are necessarily holding our breath, just because of kind of the forces that support the Trump administration are not going to be friendly to our type of politics as it relates to labor. But you know, looking back on the election, what is the role generally that you think unions played prior to November 5th?
Well, I mean, we could talk about this for hours because there's so much
Mm,
to unpack, right? But
mm,
when you look at an incoming administration that's made up of the folks that, Donald Trump has surrounded himself with, even if there is somebody at the Department of Labor that has an ear that we could speak to, all you're doing is buying time.
right.
The forces within the administration and the Republican Party are solely bent on trying to destroy, the current makeup of organized labor, right? And that's the reality. I mean, we talked about three people in the Republican caucus that voted for protecting the right to organize, right? If the rest of the Republican
Right.
Party is 100% against it. And same thing with the folks, that surround Donald Trump. So let's not kid ourselves. But the problem that we have is that the Democratic Party has lost the message to the working class as well. And, we find ourselves in this position where most working people are torn against each other. And what you see is you have working people that are the ones that can decide the fate of any election just being completely pitted against one another. And it's because both parties have failed to be able to really truly capitalize on that pain that working people have. Donald Trump's been able to tap into it and tap into
Mhm.
people's fear and anxiety, but hasn't provided any sort of path forward. The Democratic
Right.
Party has lacked the ability to connect to the message of how they are going to help working people too. And organized
Mm,
labor, we find ourselves right in the middle of that. And we find ourselves in the crosshairs oftentimes from both parties, and when we went out and spoke to our members, we spoke about the good things that the Biden administration did. We were able to
mhm.
move them. We were able to move them. We were one of the only pillars of the Democratic Party that outperformed the rest of the electorate. We
Right.
had over 57, 58% support. And people look at that like, oh, well, that's only within, maybe 5 to 10%. That is big. When you're talking
Mhm.
about being able to move working class people, and the Democratic Party has failed to capitalize on any real message. So, we find ourselves in this position now where it's literally a fight for where does organized labor stand within both parties. And until the Democratic Party understands that their working class message has to be, how do we help working people that are not in unions gain
Mm.
power in the workplace? That message never seems to come out of the Democratic Party. What you hear from the Democratic Party is we will support union workers. Oh, and when unions do well, all workers do well. Well, that doesn't resonate to somebody who's
Mm.
working a minimum wage job or is working as a misclassified 1099 construction employee who has no access to collective bargaining, no access to, a secure healthcare system and a secure retirement. It just doesn't speak to them.
Mm. Right. Right. And so, I there are going to be a lot of conversations over the next 4 years among the Democratic coalition about how do we respond, and there are already some that are saying that and it's funny because, like you said, union members are like, I think, the only demographic that did not trend Republican, and that, according to at least some surveys, voted in higher numbers for Harris than Biden. The only demographic, and yet still there are Democrats who are saying that, okay, well, the way to win is to jettison the support for unions from our platform. What is your response to folks like that that well, we tried the populism, we tried the economic stuff, with the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, we tried it, it didn't work. Now we just have to be Republican light.
Yeah, well, that is a doomed and failed approach for all working class voters. And if that approach takes hold, we have a serious issue on our hand for working class people, not for labor unions, but for working class people as a whole. The message that needs to come out of the Democratic Party is, how are you going to give more power to the working class, right? Not just send some crumbs down every opportunity you get through legislation. I mean, we really need a party that understands how to organize a message, and how to mobilize workers, period. If the Democratic Party doesn't understand that that's their path forward to the working class, then they're going to lose them, and they're going to lose them for good. And the time's now for them to really understand that it takes an organizing message. And how are you going to go back into places like Alabama, West Virginia, large swaths of the country that have been just completely written off by the Democratic Party, and where workers have also turned away from the Democratic Party? You need to go back in with an organizing message about how you're going to get power back to the working class, period. How you're going to fight for things that are going to make their lives better. And just providing a tax cut or a tax incentive to somebody, that doesn't resonate. You got to speak from a position of power, and how you're going to build a working class movement that gives workers power in this country. Guess who does that? The labor movement. The labor movement provides that power for working people, not a party, not the government. The labor movement does. So if anybody steps away from the labor movement during this time period, that is a failed and doomed approach.
What should the labor movement be doing over the next 4 years, both to, defend ourselves from the attacks that the Trump administration will undoubtedly hurl at us, but also to is there opportunity to go on the offense over the next 4 years and potentially do what we haven't done really for the last 30 years and build union density? What should the labor movement be doing over the next 4 years?
We have to do what we do. We have to double down our efforts to organize unorganized workers. And when we do that, we have this opportunity over the next 4 years to show the American public how difficult it is, because of a broken system, for worker power in this country. And if we walk away from organizing unorganized workers during this time period, we will regret it. If anything, we have to double down and triple down our efforts to organize the unorganized. And during this time period, where we know that the NLRB is not going to be supportive of workers, where we know that the federal government's not going to support the right to organize, we have to organize a movement across all sectors of our economy to show how flawed the system is, so that we can build a working class movement again that demands change. That is what's missing in the working class right now, is an organized message, a militant organized message, to bring it to light so that we can then push for real reform to give the working class a voice again in this country. And you're not going to hear that from the Republican Party. And the Democratic Party gets an opportunity right now to reshape its image. If they want to do it, I would hope that they do it through a working class lens.
We've gone a little bit long. I appreciate your patience. My last question here is, I saw you on Twitter yesterday. You met with Bernie Sanders. There was a really interesting effort that I'd love to pick your brain about in the 90s to form a labor party. And there's been some conversation, and it's perennially brought up in union meetings and all this kinds of stuff, and that we need a labor party. And I'm kind of, I'm sympathetic to the idea, but I'm not so sure about it. But I saw, you with Bernie Sanders. I think one of the words that was used about it was scheming. You were scheming with Bernie Sanders, and he put out something, Bernie did after the election, said, "Stay tuned." So is there any news that you have that you want to break here about your schemes with Bernie Sanders?
Well, first off, I think he had it right. And he had it
Mm.
right in 2016. He had it right in 2020. But because the Democratic Party had learned and over time to play it safe and continue to, try to, receive its funding and support from both the business community and Wall Street, I think you can never serve two masters, right? And I think the labor movement, and I agree. I mean, listen, we have to work within the two-party structure at this point, right? But the labor movement can certainly stand as an independent voice for working class people and take every election and make every election about supporting working class people. And before we give our support to Democratic candidates just because they have a D in front of their name, I think we have to really think about how we're organizing working people's power. And more people are classifying themselves as independents.
Mm.
And more people, I think, are looking for independent voices. And I think if we take this opportunity to really be smart about how the labor movement calls balls and strikes on both parties and is the independent voice that supports working class people in this country, we can start winning again.
Mm. President Williams, International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jacob.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.
Which side are you on?